They thought the cold steel locking my wrists marked the end of my life. But they were wrong. My husband, a prestigious prosecutor, used his power to imprison me for a phantom crime against a fetus that never formed, just to pave the way for his mistress and seize my inheritance. He forgot one thing. In prison, I had time to plan. I do not need a defense attorney anymore. I am his verdict. My name is Alara, and the end of my life began with the shattering of oak wood at 5 in the morning. The sound was not just a door breaking, it was the violent intrusion of reality into the sanctuary of my Seattle home. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs, just as the bedroom door flew open. Blinded by tactical flashlights, I could hardly process the shouting before rough hands hauled me from the warmth of my sheets. Ilara Vance, you are under arrest for intentional injury resulting in a miscarriage in the first degree. The words made no sense. I was the 34-year-old chief strategy officer at Nexacor. I solved complex logistical problems for a living. I did not hurt people. And, miscarriage, I blinked, trying to clear the sleep from my eyes as the cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists. "What are you talking about?" I screamed, struggling as they marched me into the hallway. "I haven't touched anyone. Let me go." Then I saw the audience for my humiliation. Gavin stood at the top of the grand staircase. My husband, the 42-year-old candidate for state attorney general, looked down at me with a mask of perfectly sculpted devastation. He was wearing his silk robe, his hair slightly tousled to suggest he had just been woken up, but his eyes were alert. Beside him sat Sienna. The 22-year-old campaign intern was in a wheelchair, her hands clutching her flat stomach, sobbing with a theatrical intensity that echoed off the marble walls. "She killed him!" Sienna wailed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She knew. She knew about us, and she pushed me. I stared at her, my mouth gaping open. I did not even know she was pregnant. The incident she was referring to happened yesterday. She had tripped on the landing. I was 5 feet away from her. I had reached out to help her up, and she had flinched away. It was a clumsy stumble, nothing more. The officer shoved me forward. As I passed Gavin, he did not reach out to stop them. He did not demand a warrant. He leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear, and the mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. "You have become a burden to my career. Sorry," he whispered. The chill that ran down my spine was colder than the Seattle rain waiting outside. The processing center was a nightmare of fluorescent lights and the smell of bleach and despair. They took everything, my fingerprints, my mugshot, and my dignity. When they confiscated my wedding ring, I felt a phantom weight lift from my finger, replaced by the heavy realization of betrayal. I sat in the holding cell, shivering in the thin orange jumpsuit, trying to piece together the last 6 months. Gavin had changed. The late nights at the office, the sudden business trips to Diassi, the way he stopped looking at me. And Sienna. She was always there, bringing him files at the house, laughing at his jokes, acting the part of the indispensable assistant. I had been too busy running a billion-dollar tech strategy to see what was happening in my own living room. My only lifeline came in the form of a lawyer Gavin hired. I expected defense. I expected outrage. "Alara," the lawyer said, not even sitting down. "The evidence is damning. Sienna has medical records. We have the incident report. If you go to trial, Gavin's numbers will tank. He is the victim here too. I am innocent," I snapped, my voice hoarse. "Listen to me," he hissed, leaning against the bars. "Plead guilty. We can get it reduced to involuntary manslaughter. 2 years, maybe less with good behavior. If you fight this, you will destroy him." I did not push her, I yelled, slamming my hand against the table. "Then you are on your own," he said, straightening his tie. "No bail. The judge is a golf buddy of the district attorney. They consider you a flight risk." He left me there. Hours later. The guard turned up the volume on the small television mounted in the corner of the communal cell. I looked up and felt the blood drain from my face. It was a press conference. Gavin stood behind a podium, microphones thrust in his face like spears. He looked broken. He wiped a tear from his cheek with a trembling hand. "This is the hardest day of my life," Gavin said to the cameras, his voice cracking with practiced perfection. "I love my wife, but the law is absolute. If she committed this crime, if she took the life of my unborn child with Sienna, then she must face justice. I will not intervene. I stand with the victims, even when the perpetrator is in my own home." The other inmates jeered at the screen, but I just sat there, frozen. He was not just divorcing me, he was burying me to build his pedestal. 3 years ago, my life looked like a page torn from a glossy society magazine, but the ink was toxic. I sat on the concrete floor of my cell, closing my eyes to summon the memory of the turning point. It was a fundraising gala for Gavin's first major campaign. I stood in the shadows while he basked in the spotlight. Charming donors with that winning smile that I now knew was practiced in front of a mirror. What nobody knew was that the check covering the catering, the venue, and his bespoke suit came from my account. My grandmother left me a trust fund worth millions, but she was a woman of strict, old-fashioned principles. The capital was locked tight. It would only transfer to me fully if I maintained a happy marriage for 5 years, or if I divorced due to the proven fault of my spouse. Gavin knew the fine print better than I did. He played the part of the devoted husband perfectly in public, but in private, he was a master architect of guilt. "You are working late again," Gavin would say, looking at me with sad, puppy-dog eyes while I reviewed spreadsheets at the kitchen table. "I miss my wife. Alara, sometimes I feel like I am just an accessory to your ambition." I believed him. I apologized for working hard to fund his dreams. Then came Sienna. She was 22, fresh out of college, and projected an air of fragility that drew Gavin in like a moth to a flame. She started as a volunteer, then an intern, and suddenly she was everywhere. She was in our kitchen making coffee, in his study organizing files, always looking at him with wide, worshipping eyes. She played the victim, always having a flat tire or a scary landlord, needing Gavin's strong protection. I was the cold, corporate wife. She was the warm, needy damsel. My reflection in the small metal mirror of the cell brought me back to the present. The first 2 days in general population were brutal. A woman named Spike tried to take my food tray, slamming her fist onto the table. "You think you are better than us." Princess Spike sneered. I did not flinch. I looked at her with the same analytical detachment I used during board meetings at Nexicor. "I am not better," I said calmly, "but I am richer. If you keep the others off my back, I will ensure your commissary account is topped up every week until you are released. I know you have a hearing next month. A good lawyer costs money." "I have money." Spike blinked, then nodded slowly. I had bought my safety. It was during yard time that I met Martha. She was 60, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen everything. She was a legendary forensic accountant for the cartel before Gavin's office put her away. Ironically, she was innocent of the specific charge they pinned on her. "You are thinking too small, honey," Martha told me as we walked the perimeter. "He does not just want the girl. He wants the gold. He could have just divorced me," I whispered, gripping the fence, "and lose the trust fund." Martha laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "Read the clause again. If you are incapacitated or incarcerated for a felony, who becomes the legal guardian of your assets?" The realization hit me like a physical blow. It was never about love or hate. It was a hostile takeover. He needed me in prison to trigger the exclusion clause. He would control my money as my guardian while I rotted in here. Everything clicked into place. The accident. I replayed the scene in my mind. The hallway had been dark. Sienna had been standing at the top of the stairs. I remembered seeing a strange sheen on the hardwood floor earlier that day, like floor wax applied too thick in just one spot. And the security camera. Gavin had mentioned casually that the Wi-Fi was down that morning. He planned it all. I stammered, my hands shaking. Sienna never showed me an ultrasound. Not once. It was just Gavin saying they heard the heartbeat. No body, no crime, Martha murmured. But in this case, no baby. Big crime. I did not cry that night. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I asked a guard for a notepad and a pen. I sat on my bunk, using the dim light from the corridor. I stopped being Alara the victim and became Alara the chief strategy officer. I began to write. I remembered every unexplained dinner receipt. I recalled the late-night phone calls Gavin took in the garage. I listed the dates he claimed to be at conferences when his credit card charges showed local withdrawals. I turned my prison cell into a war room. Every inconsistency, every lie, every financial anomaly I had ignored for the sake of love, I now dissected for the sake of vengeance. You want a war. Gavin, I whispered to the empty air, the pen digging into the paper. I will give you a war. 6 months of confinement had stripped away the softness of my old life, leaving only a hardened core of survival instinct. I had fired the shark Gavin hired on day 1. In his place sat Kenji, a public defender with a frayed collar and eyes that burned with a hunger for justice that money could not buy. He was the only one in the legal circuit brave enough, or perhaps desperate enough, to take a case against the likely future Attorney General. I need you to access a secure server, I told him, sliding a scrap of paper across the metal table. Gavin thinks the cloud is just weather. He never knew I backed up every digital footprint our household ever made. Through Martha, whose influence extended far beyond the prison walls, I had arranged for the encryption key to reach Kenji safely. 2 weeks later, Kenji returned, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. You were right, Kenji whispered, leaning in close. I found a series of transfers from his campaign funds. $10,000 here, $15,000 there. They all end up at a private clinic in Mexico. And your accuser, Sienna. He shook his head. Her real name is Amber. She has a record in Ohio for insurance fraud. She slips on wet floors for a living. The validation was sweet, but danger followed truth closely. 3 days later, in the laundry room, a new inmate bumped into me. I saw the glint of a sharpened toothbrush shank before I saw her face. Sorry, princess, she hissed. Nothing personal. Before the plastic blade could pierce my ribs, a heavy metal tray slammed into the attacker's head. Martha stood there, breathing hard. The message was clear. Gavin did not just want me in prison, he wanted me silenced permanently, or brain damaged enough to be declared incompetent. That way, he would get legal guardianship over my trust fund without needing a divorce. He is getting desperate, Martha said later, as she cleaned a cut on her knuckles. You are getting too close. Kenji kept digging. He found the smoking gun in the medical files the prosecution had handed over. Look at this, Kenji said during his next visit, pointing to a highlighted row on a document. These hormone levels. They are for a woman who is not pregnant. If she was 12 weeks along, this number should be 10 times higher. And the nurse who signed this, she vanished the day after your arrest. But I found her. She is hiding in a motel in Oregon. She is terrified. Alara. Then came the visit I had been waiting for. Gavin came to see me. He wore a navy suit that cost more than Kenji made in a year. He looked at the picture of the grieving, benevolent leader. He sat down, placing a document on the divider. Ilara, he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. I hate seeing you like this. It breaks my heart. I have pulled some strings. If you sign this power of attorney giving me control of the estate to manage your legal fees, and plead guilty, I can get the charges reduced. Probation. You could be out in a year. He reached out, placing his hand on the glass where my hand rested. Please, Do it for us, he pleaded, his eyes moist. I looked at the document. It was the key to my grandmother's fortune. It was the only thing he had ever truly loved. I looked up at him, studying every line of his handsome, lying face. I saw the fear behind his eyes. He knew his polls were slipping. He knew the money was running out. I stood up slowly. I did not scream. I did not cry. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass between us. You should enjoy that expensive suit while you can, I said, my voice steady and cold. I turned and walked back toward the heavy steel door, leaving him sitting there, the blood draining from his face as he realized his pawn had just become the queen. The trial began with a media frenzy that Gavin had orchestrated like a maestro conducting a symphony of lies. Every news outlet painted me as the bitter, barren wife who lashed out at the young, fertile mistress. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with theatrical hostility. Sienna took the stand first. She looked frail, dressed in a modest cardigan that was a far cry from her usual designer clothes. She wept softly into a handkerchief, her shoulders shaking. I just wanted to love him, Sienna sobbed, looking at the jury with wide, watery eyes. Ilara knew. She stared at my stomach with such hate she pushed me down those stairs, and I felt my baby die. The jury ate it up. Then came the prosecution's fabricated evidence. They produced a diary they claimed was mine, filled with violent threats I had never written. Our former housekeeper, a woman I had treated like family, took the oath and lied through her teeth, claiming she heard me threaten to kill the bastard in Sienna's womb. Gavin sat at the prosecution table, not as a lawyer, but as the grieving father. His head bowed in sorrow. It looked hopeless until Kenji stood up. He adjusted his cheap tie and looked at the judge. The defense calls Brenda Miller to the stand. A ripple of confusion went through the room. Gavin's head snapped up, his eyes widening in genuine panic. The back doors opened, and federal marshals escorted a trembling woman in a gray hoodie to the witness box. It was the nurse from the clinic in Mexico. Ms. Miller, Kenji asked, his voice ringing clear. Did you create a prenatal file for the woman known as Sienna on August 15th? Yes, Brenda whispered, gripping the railing. And was there a fetus? No, she said, her voice shaking. There was no baby. Mr. Vance gave me $50,000 in cash to forge the ultrasound and the blood work. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, demanding order. But Kenji was not done. He held up a certified medical document. Your Honor, we have obtained the authentic medical records of the accuser from a hospital in Ohio. These records show that 3 years ago, the woman known as Sienna underwent a tubal ligation. It is medically impossible for her to have been pregnant. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. I looked at Gavin. The color had drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax statue. Sienna let out a gasp, her eyes rolling back in her head, and she collapsed to the floor. This time, nobody moved to help her immediately. This case is dismissed, the judge roared, his face red with fury. Bailiff, take Mr. Vance and the accuser into custody for perjury and conspiracy. I was acquitted instantly. The shackles were removed, but as I rubbed my sore wrists, I watched the police read Gavin his rights. He was already shouting, pointing at the unconscious Sienna. She lied to me too, Gavin screamed, his desperation echoing off the walls. I am a victim here. That woman, she tricked me about the pregnancy. He was already throwing her to the wolves to save himself. However, justice for men like Gavin operates on a different timeline. While Sienna remained in jail, Gavin used every political favor he had banked over the last decade. He was released on bail less than 24 hours later, spinning a narrative that he was a heartbroken man duped by a con artist mistress. I walked out of the courthouse into a blinding storm of camera flashes. My assets were still frozen pending the civil investigation, and my home was a crime scene sealed with yellow tape. I stood on the concrete steps, possessing nothing but the clothes on my back and the truth. I watched a black sedan pull up to the curb. Gavin sat in the back seat, hiding behind dark sunglasses. As the car pulled away, I did not answer the reporter shouting my name. I just stared at the taillights disappearing into the traffic. It is not over. I promised. My new sanctuary was a one-bedroom apartment with peeling beige wallpaper and a radiator that clanked like a dying engine. It was a gift from Martha, who had connections even the government could not touch. While Gavin returned to our sprawling estate, I sat on a second-hand chair, opening a laptop I had bought with cash. I did not need a gun to destroy him. I just needed Wi-Fi and the administrative passwords I had created years ago at Nexacore. It took me less than an hour to bypass the firewalls. Gavin was arrogant, but he was also sloppy. I found a labyrinth of phantom consulting contracts. He had been draining Nexacore's accounts, funneling money into shell companies that paid for his gambling debts and Sienna's designer wardrobe. I saw charges for a penthouse suite in Las Vegas and a diamond bracelet worth $15,000, billed as strategic meeting expenses. I did not release it all at once. I needed him to climb higher so the fall would be fatal. I contacted his political rival, a man named Senator Sterling, using an encrypted email. I sent him just enough a single bank statement showing a withdrawal of $25,000 from campaign funds to an offshore betting site. It was a breadcrumb. But it was enough to make the press start asking uncomfortable questions. Gavin panicked. He launched a forgiveness tour, hosting a lavish fundraising gala where he played the role of the saintly husband betrayed by a mentally unstable mistress. He sent bouquets of white lilies to my dingy apartment, accompanied by letters written on his official stationery. Ilara, my love. One letter read, I was lost. She manipulated me. Come home. We can rebuild this empire together. I threw the flowers into the trash and burned the letters in the kitchen sink, watching his handwriting turn to ash. I did not want his apology. I wanted his head on a platter. To get that, I needed the loose end he had cut. Sienna was out on bail, but Gavin had severed her lifeline. He had evicted her from the condo he paid for and blocked her number. I found her living in her car behind a convenience store, looking nothing like the polished girl who had testified against me. I tapped on her window at 2 a.m. She screamed, fumbling for the door lock, but stopped when she saw my face. You, she breathed, her eyes wide with terror. Relax, I said, leaning against the cold metal of her car. I am not here to hurt you. I am here to offer you a way out. We met an hour later in the shadows of a deserted parking structure. I handed her an envelope containing a plane ticket to Argentina and $5,000 in cash. Why, Sienna asked, clutching the envelope to her chest, her hands trembling. I sent you to prison. I lied about everything, because you hate him now almost as much as I do. I replied, and because he is going to let you take the fall for the perjury charge unless you disappear. He does not care about you. Sienna. He never did. She looked down, tears streaking the grime on her face. He is a monster, she whispered. It was not just the money. Ilara, he is meeting with the developers. They are bribing him to rezone public parkland for condos. He bragged about it. He said he owns the zoning board. I need proof, I said, extending my hand. Give me the phone. Sienna hesitated for a second, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out a cracked smartphone. It is all in there, she said, her voice shaking. The texts about the fake baby, the recordings of him threatening me, the emails with the developers, everything. She handed me the device. It felt heavy, not with weight, but with potential energy. Go. I told her, do not look back. Sienna started her car and sped away, leaving me alone in the dark. I looked down at the screen. watching it light up. I held the death warrant of Gavin's career in my palm. He thought he was playing chess, but he had just handed his queen to the opponent. The walls were finally beginning to close in on Gavin, and the sound was music to my ears. My little leaks to Senator Sterling had done their damage. 3 major donors pulled their funding in a single afternoon, citing moral misalignment. Gavin was hemorrhaging money and support, and his reaction was exactly what I predicted: panic. He blew up my phone. I watched the screen light up with his name over and over again. 50 calls in 3 hours. He left voicemails that swung wildly between begging for mercy and screaming threats about my mental health. "Ilara, pick up the phone. I know you are doing this. If you do not stop, I will have you committed. I swear I will tell everyone you are delusional." I did not block him. I wanted him to feel the silence. Instead of hiding, I decided to haunt him. I attended a charity auction for ocean conservation where I knew he would be making an appearance. I wore a sharp black suit, standing near the back of the ballroom. When Gavin took the stage, his eyes scanned the crowd, desperate for validation. Then he saw me. I raised my glass of sparkling water in a mock toast, a cold, thin smile playing on my lips. He faltered in the middle of his speech about integrity. He started sweating under the stage lights, his hands shaking so badly the microphone rattled in the stand. That night, I utilized my old network in the tech world. I logged onto an encrypted forum frequented by political journalists and dropped a simple, anonymous tip a leading candidate for attorney general is about to be exposed in a compromising video. It was a bluff. Or at least, the video part was vague enough to let Gavin's imagination fill in the blanks. He took the bait. I tracked his car via the GPS tracker I had slipped into his briefcase during our marriage, a precaution he never found. He drove frantically to Sienna's old apartment complex, banging on doors, shouting her name, Amber. "Open the door. How much do you want? I will pay you double. Just do not release it." But Sienna was gone, safe in South America. His inability to find her terrified him more than her presence ever could. While he was chasing ghosts, I went for the jugular of his financial security. My acquittal meant the trust fund was mine again. I walked into the First National Bank, where Gavin sat on the advisory board and held significant preferred stock. "I am closing all my accounts," I told the branch manager, my voice loud enough to carry across the lobby. I cannot trust an institution associated with a man like Gavin Vance. I withdrew $8 million in assets. The withdrawal triggered a liquidity alert. Gavin's stock options plummeted, and his credit line was frozen within 2 hours. That night, the rat walked into the trap. I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks away, watching the live feed from my apartment on my tablet. Gavin stood at my front door. He looked around nervously, then slid his old spare key into the lock. He did not know I had replaced the cylinder with a smart lock that allowed the key to turn, but silently alerted the police and started recording in high definition. He stumbled into my living room, frantic. He tore through my drawers, dumping papers onto the floor, looking for the evidence he thought I was hiding. He found nothing until he reached the coffee table. A single cream-colored envelope sat there. On the front, in my elegant handwriting, I had written to Gavin, the great failure. I watched on the screen as he tore it open. His hands trembled as he pulled out the contents, a copy of the bank statement showing his bribe payments, and a photograph I had taken months ago of him meeting a corrupt developer. "No," he gasped, clutching the table for support. "No. This cannot be happening." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. I tapped the screen to unmute the audio just as the police kicked the door open. Police hands in the air. Gavin was on his knees, hyperventilating. They cuffed him and dragged him out, flashing lights illuminating his defeat. I thought this was it. I thought seeing him in the back of a squad car for burglary would be the end. But I underestimated the depth of his corruption. By 10 o'clock the next morning, he was out. The police report had been altered to describe the incident as a domestic dispute, and a misunderstanding over property retrieval. He spun a story about trying to pick up his remaining belongings, and his friends in the precinct bought it. I sat in the coffee shop, staring at the news ticker announcing his release. He was bruised, but he was still walking free. He was a cockroach that survived every nuclear blast. Fine, I whispered to myself, closing my laptop with a snap. Burglary charges were too small. Financial ruin was too slow. If the law could not hold him because he owned the people who enforced it, then I had to destroy him in front of the only jury he could not bribe the public. I needed a stage so big and a spotlight so bright that no amount of political spin could hide his darkness. I needed the gala. The Night of Justice Gala was the most expensive lie in Seattle. Chandeliers dripping with crystals hung over a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns, illuminating the very people Gavin had charmed, bribed, or fooled for the last decade. He believed this night would save him. He believed that if he stood on a stage surrounded by flags and donors, the ugliness of his arrest would fade into a mere misunderstanding. I arrived 20 minutes late. I had purchased the gold tier sponsorship table under the name of a shell corporation, Nemesis Holdings. When I walked through the double doors, the room went quiet. I was not wearing the modest pastel colors Gavin used to force me into. I wore a gown of crimson silk that looked like fresh blood under the lights, with a neckline that screamed defiance. Gavin spotted me from across the room. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes, quickly masked by a politician's smile. He excused himself from a group of bankers and made a beeline for me, signaling the photographers to follow. He wanted a reconciliation photo. He wanted the headline, "Forgiving Wife Stands by Husband." He reached out to touch my elbow, but I took a sharp step back. "Ilara," he hissed through his teeth, keeping his smile fixed for the cameras. "What are you doing? Everyone is watching. Please. Just play along for one night. We can fix this." I looked at him, swirling the champagne in my glass. "I am not here to fix anything. Gavin," I said, my voice low and pleasant. "I am here to watch the finale." I walked past him and took my seat at the center table, right in front of the podium. Gavin had no choice but to continue the show. He ascended the stage, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the crowd with practiced gravitas. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gavin began, his voice booming with false sincerity. "Recent events have tested my family, but true justice is about resilience. It is about standing firm when the winds of falsehood blow. He was good. I had to give him that." Half the room was nodding along. I checked my watch. It was time. I tapped a single command on my phone. The signal routed through the venue's unsecured audio-visual system, which I had compromised 3 hours ago. Behind Gavin, the massive projection screen displaying his campaign logo flickered and turned black. The audio from his microphone cut out with a sharp screech of feedback. "Technical difficulties," Gavin joked nervously, tapping the dead mic. Then, a voice boomed through the hall speakers. It was not Gavin's stage voice. It was his private voice, cruel, arrogant, laughing. "My stupid wife will rot in that cell until her bones turn to dust." The room gasped as one organism. On the screen, a shaky video appeared. It was filmed from a low angle, clearly hidden. It showed Gavin sitting in our living room, holding a glass of scotch, talking to someone off camera. "I will use her trust fund to buy that Senate seat next year," the video Gavin continued, taking a sip. "And the Miscarriage. That was a genius move. Sienna. Absolute genius. Who cares if the kid never existed? The voters love a tragedy." Gavin froze on stage. He turned around slowly, his face draining of blood until he looked like a corpse. "But Gavin," Sienna's voice came from the video, fearful and trembling. "What if she finds out about the payoffs?" "She won't," video Gavin snarled, his face twisting into a sneer that was magnified 10 feet tall behind him. "And if you get cold feet, remember that accidents happen. Amber, brakes fail, houses catch fire, Do not test me. The video cut to a slideshow of text messages, screenshots of him authorizing wire transfers to the nurse, detailed instructions on how to stage the fall. Turn it off. Gavin screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek. He waved his arms frantically at the projection booth. This is deep fake. This is AI. I never said that nobody moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. I stood up slowly from my table. I locked eyes with him. I raised my glass of champagne in a silent toast. Checkmate. The heavy double doors at the back of the hall burst open. This time, it was not the local police captain who played golf with Gavin on Sundays. It was a tactical team in windbreakers emblazoned with 3 yellow letters, FBI. Gavin Vance, the lead agent, shouted, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. You are under arrest for election fraud, federal money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Gavin stumbled back, knocking over the podium. The symbol of his authority crashed to the floor with a deafening thud. He looked at the crowd, pleading with his eyes, but saw only disgust. No. He whimpered as the agents swarmed the stage. I am the Attorney General. You cannot touch me. They spun him around and slammed him against the wall. The click of the handcuffs was amplified by the dead silence of the room as they dragged him away, kicking and screaming like a petulant child. The cameras that he loved so much flashed relentlessly, capturing every second of his destruction. The federal marshals did not offer Gavin the courtesy of a backdoor exit or a blur on the evening news. This time, there was no bail hearing that ended with a handshake. The mountain of evidence extracted from Sienna's phone and my financial records was a landslide that buried him alive. Sienna never made it to Argentina. She was intercepted by customs agents at the airport in Miami, clutching a fake passport and a bag full of cash. Faced with a federal indictment, she did exactly what survivors do. She turned on the predator. She cut a deal with the prosecutor, trading her silence for a reduced sentence. Her testimony was the final nail in Gavin's coffin. She detailed every instruction he gave her, from the fake pregnancy symptoms to the layout of the camera blind spots in our home. While Gavin sat in a 6x8 cell, I went to work on what remained of his life. My divorce attorneys were merciless. Since our prenuptial agreement had a clause voiding protections in the event of criminal misconduct, I claimed everything. I took the stocks, the offshore accounts he tried to hide, and the retirement funds. I sued him for defamation, emotional distress, and fraud. By the time the judge banged the gavel on our divorce decree, Gavin was not just broke, he was millions of dollars in debt to me. He would spend the rest of his life working in the prison laundry for 12 cents an hour just to pay the interest on what he owed me. Then came the house. The bank foreclosed on our sprawling Seattle estate after Gavin's assets were frozen. It went to auction. I bought it back for a fraction of its value because nobody wanted a property attached to such a scandal. I stood on the lawn a week later, wearing a hard hat, watching a yellow bulldozer roar to life. Are you sure you want to keep the foundation? Ms. Vance, the foreman, asked me, shouting over the engine noise. Keep nothing, I replied. Tear it all down to the dirt. I want the earth scorched. I watched with grim satisfaction as the master bedroom, the place where he had whispered his lies, collapsed into a pile of dust and splintered wood. In its place, I commissioned the construction of the Phoenix Center, a nonprofit legal aid organization dedicated to helping women who, like me, had been weaponized by the legal system. The media could not get enough of the Iron Widow, as they called me. I granted one exclusive interview to a reputable network. I sat in a simple chair, looking directly into the camera. Gavin Vance is not a tragedy. I told the world. He is a warning. Power without character is just a well-dressed monster. In the weeks leading up to his sentencing, my phone logged hundreds of calls from the correctional facility. I never answered, but I let them go to voicemail. I listened to them at night, sipping wine, analyzing his descent into madness. Ilara, please. His voice cracked in one message, sounding small and terrified. I can't do this. I am scared. We were a team. You owe me. The next message would be a scream of rage. You witch. You planned this. I will kill you. I will find a way. I saved every single one. I forwarded them to the parole board for his future hearings. He was digging his own grave with his tongue. The day of the final sentencing arrived. The courtroom in Seattle was packed. Reporters, victims of his past prosecutions, and curious onlookers squeezed into the gallery to hear the number. I was 4,000 miles away. I sat at a small cafe table in Florence, Italy, watching the pigeons chase crumbs on the cobblestones. My phone buzzed with a text message from Kenji. 25 years. No parole eligibility for at least 20. I put the phone down on the white tablecloth. I ordered an espresso and a pastry. The air smelled of roasted coffee and rain, distinctively different from the sterile scent of the courtroom or the metallic tang of the prison cell. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, intoxicating oxygen of total freedom. I did not need to see him in handcuffs again. I knew he was gone. Check, please, I said to the waiter, smiling for the first time in years without a shadow behind my eyes. It has been exactly 365 days since the heavy steel doors slammed shut behind Gavin, sealing him into a concrete box for the next quarter of a century. While he rotted in the darkness, I bloomed in the light. I relaunched my career, not as the shadow behind a powerful man, but as the CEO of Ethelgard Analytics. My firm specializes in corporate crisis management and strategic restructuring. The irony is delicious. The skills I learned dismantling my husband's life are now the very skills Fortune 500 companies pay me millions to utilize. Reports from the inside reached me through Kenji, who kept an ear to the ground. Gavin is living in a hell of his own making. In prison, there is a hierarchy, and a disgraced prosecutor who built his career on locking up the very men he now showers with is at the absolute bottom. He is despised. He spends 23 hours a day in protective custody, isolated and shivering, terrified that the moment he steps into the general population, someone he once prosecuted will decide to settle the score with a sharpened spoon, deprived of his audience. Gavin turned to the only person he believed would still listen. He started writing. At first, the letters were infrequent, typed on official prison stationery. Then they became a flood, handwritten, scrawled on lined yellow paper in jagged, desperate script. They arrive at my office every Tuesday and Thursday. I never read them. I have a system. My assistant sanitizes them, places them in a large Ziploc bag, and leaves them on my desk. I took the latest batch home with me tonight. I know what they say without opening the envelopes. He oscillates between grandiose delusions of our past love and pathetic begging. He is a narcissist in withdrawal. He does not miss me. He misses the reflection of himself he saw in my eyes. By refusing to engage, by refusing to visit or reply, I am denying him the oxygen he needs to breathe. Last week, his new appellate lawyer called me. He sounded young and shaken. Ms. Vance, the lawyer said, his voice trembling slightly over the phone. I am calling because, well, Gavin is deteriorating. He has lost 30 pounds. He sits in his cell rocking back and forth. He keeps saying he just needs to explain things to you. I sat in my corner office, looking out at the Seattle skyline, twirling a pen between my fingers. Is there a legal reason for this call, I asked. It is a humanitarian one, the lawyer pleaded. He is threatening self-harm. Ms. Vance, he says if you do not visit, he has nothing left. He is in a very dark place. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for him. That sounds like an administrative problem for the Department of Corrections, I replied, my voice smooth and devoid of pity. If he is a danger to himself, they have protocols for that. Padded rooms, straitjackets. Tell the warden. But he is your husband, the lawyer stammered. Ex-husband, I corrected him. And tell him that if he wants attention, he should try reading a book. I hear the prison library is quite extensive. I hung up before he could respond. I do not live in the past anymore. I have someone new. Julian is an architect. He designs sustainable housing. He is quiet, kind, and when he looks at me, he sees a partner, not a ladder to climb. He knows about Gavin. He knows about the trial. He does not treat me like a broken doll to be fixed, but like a survivor to be respected. Tonight, Julian is cooking dinner in the kitchen. I can smell roasted garlic and rosemary drifting down the hallway. I stand before the gas fireplace in my living room. The flames dance behind the glass, orange and blue. In my hand, I hold the stack of unopened letters from this month. There must be 10 of them. I can feel the frantic energy emanating from the paper, the scratchy pen strokes of a man screaming into the void. I look at the return address. Inmate number 7940. Not Gavin Vance. Just a number. I could burn them. That would be dramatic. But burning them would acknowledge that they affect me. It would be a reaction. Instead, I walk over to an old shoebox sitting on the bottom shelf of the bookcase. I lift the lid. It is packed tight with hundreds of unopened envelopes. I toss the new ones in, forcing the lid down. I am not keeping them out of sentiment. I am keeping them as a trophy collection of his despair. Let him write. Let him pour his soul out onto the page. I will never read a single word. Ilara Julian calls out from the kitchen. Dinner is ready. Coming, I reply. Turning my back on the box, I walk toward the light and the warmth of a real home, leaving Gavin where he belongs in the dark, speaking to no one. The calendar on my wall marked exactly 2 years since the gavel fell, sealing Gavin inside a concrete tomb. I had moved on, but he had not. His name flashed across the news ticker that morning. My ex-husband had filed for early parole, citing deteriorating cardiovascular health. I knew the truth. His heart was fine. It was his ego that was dying. I decided it was time to close the book. I agreed to visit him. The drive to the state penitentiary took 3 hours. I walked through the security checkpoints, the heavy buzzing of the metal detectors serving as the soundtrack to my final act. When I sat down in the visitation booth, the man on the other side of the reinforced glass was a stranger. Gavin had aged 20 years in 24 months. His once thick hair was thinning and gray. His skin was sallow, hanging loosely off his cheekbones. When he saw me, his eyes lit up with a terrifying, desperate hope. He picked up the receiver with trembling hands. Ilara. Oh, God. Ilara. You came. I knew. I knew you still cared. He stammered, his voice cracking. Look at me. I am dying in here. You have to help me. I have changed. I have found God. We can start over. He pressed his palm against the glass, his fingernails dirty and yellow. Just tell the board you forgive me, he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. Please, I cannot breathe in here. I love you, Ilara. I always have. I sat in silence, my face a mask of stone. I let him talk until his voice ran dry. I let him pour out every lie he had rehearsed in the dark. When he finally stopped, waiting for my absolution, I reached into my designer handbag. I did not pull out a letter of support. I pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope with gold embossing. I pressed it against the glass so he could read every word. It was an invitation. The wedding of Ilara Vance and Julian Thorne. Gavin froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I leaned into the microphone, my voice steady and cold. I am not here to save you, Gavin. I am here so you can see what you will never touch again. You think you are getting out. You think your little health act fooled anyone. I paused, watching the realization dawn on him. I sent them everything, I whispered. Every voicemail you left me from prison. Every threat. Every time you screamed that you would kill me if you got out. I sent the recordings to the parole board this morning. Your application is dead. You are not going home. Gavin, you are going to rot in this cage until you are an old man. I stood up. No, no. Gavin screamed, slamming his fist against the glass. You cannot do this, Alara. Come back, I will kill you. I will kill you. He was thrashing now, spittle flying from his mouth. 2 guards rushed forward, grabbing him by the arms. He fought them, howling like a wounded animal, his eyes fixed on me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I turned my back on him. I walked toward the exit, the sound of his screams fading behind the heavy steel door. I stepped out of the prison into the blinding afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I went to the blocked contacts list, found the number for the correctional facility, and hit delete. Then, I popped the SIM card out of the side of the phone. I looked at the small chip one last time before tossing it into a trash can by the curb. A silver sedan pulled up in front of me. The window rolled down, and Julian smiled. Ready to go home, he asked. Yes, I said, opening the door. I am ready. I got in and closed the door, sealing the past outside. As the car drove away, I did not look back at the gray walls in the rearview mirror. I just watched the road ahead, stretching out endless and free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment below with your country or city so we can connect and share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.